So, why did I become an ophthalmologist? Well, I enjoyed everything at medical school, um, really every specialty, but I gravitated towards surgery. And towards the end of my training, I thought about all of the aspects of my training that I wanted to really concentrate on. And ophthalmology is the specialty that seemed to have the most tick boxes, in that it was, of course, surgical. It was microsurgical, so really refined, coordinated hand-to-eye stuff, which tied into my music background. And the eye involves every single system in the body: neurology, immunology, mechanics, physics, optics, eye movements. Just everything is just so all contained within one small space of the body and represented. And of course, the specialty itself has had a timetable which was compatible with my second passion, which is, of course, playing the saxophone. And I would say that ophthalmology, in terms of my enjoyment of being an eye surgeon, is kind of divided into two halves. The first is, of course, meeting and treating people who want to be independent from spectacles. Not people who are ill, but just have a disability that they want to improve upon or get rid of. The second is more the medical part of this, which is I specialized in dealing with the complications of previous surgery, be it refractive surgery or corneal transplant surgery, trauma, and being able to therapeutically repair the optics of an eye. Arthur C. Clarke has a saying that any technology that is sufficiently advanced appears to be like magic or something like that. And every day I have patients coming in from the day previously of having had their procedures, and just amazed at the Star Trek medicine, short procedure that doesn't hurt, heals in a few hours, and basically cures a great disability, which is the inability to see without glasses. What do I see as the future of ophthalmology? Well, in some ways, the future is already here. As we develop the technology around refractive surgery and eye surgery in general, we are basically making things safer and safer and safer. And the safety, for example, of laser eye surgery today, compared to when I started in the 90s, is better by about a factor of 50. In fact, if you look at the safety, for example, of wearing the safest kind of contact lens, which is daily disposable contact lenses, laser eye surgery is now as safe as wearing a daily disposable every day for 1 year. So we really have come leaps and bounds, and a lot of that is to do with our much improved diagnostic capabilities, being able to spot the eyes that shouldn't have surgery, and then the accuracy in providing the best possible results. I started my eye career, in fact, after medical school with a research bioengineering fellowship at Cornell University in New York, where I was using high-frequency ultrasound initially to look at glaucoma, but rapidly switching to an area that had not been explored before in the whole of medicine and surgery. No one had measured the individual layers of the cornea. And I found that I could do this with high-frequency ultrasound, measuring the surface layer, the epithelium, which is a layer that's half the width of one human hair, 50 microns. And we could measure it with high-frequency ultrasound with 1 micron precision. And this meant that for the first time, we were able to look at the individual layers of the cornea. And at the time when the very first trials for laser eye surgery were being developed, we were able to diagnose some of the problems that were occurring in those clinical trials. So I got involved in laser eye surgery at the beginning of the 90s through complications of corneal refractive surgery. So it's kind of poetic justice that that's what brought me into refractive surgery. And in fact, that's what keeps me very, very busy in a lot of my research time. The measurement of epithelium, of course, then later I found was applicable to the screening for keratoconus. And using epithelial profiles for this, I first scanned keratoconus in the late 90s, but it didn't occur to me to use it for screening until a few years later. I started in about 2003, 2004, developing an algorithm to basically spot keratoconus in an eye that looks practically normal by all other means. And within a few years, demonstrating this, it became essentially the driver for OCT technology to then try and develop itself in order to be able to resolve the epithelium and map it. And there are now several companies that have come out with technology. There was a prototype made by a really advanced Californian high-tech company called Ophthalmology, who were the first to use OCT to map the epithelium, and I got one of their prototypes in 2012. Bear in mind that this is 20 years after the first time that I mapped the epithelium with ultrasound. And now there are 4 or 5 OCT devices on the market that are measuring epithelium and enabling much earlier diagnosis, much more sensitive detection of keratoconus, and a more specific detection of keratoconus. I'm looking forward to all of the biomechanics, artificial intelligence work that Renato Ambrosio and the Brain Group in Brazil are doing, because using the biomechanical, the epithelial, and the tomographic analysis, this multimodal approach promises to allow us to detect keratoconus, when it just wouldn't have been possible before. And that is the gateway to safe refractive surgery. In terms of the future, I've been involved, therefore, in technological developments, and I was very fortunate in the late 90s to be associated with what at the time was the most advanced company in refractive surgery. It was Bausch & Lomb. They had acquired the 217C, the Orbscan, Storz, and they really were, a marvel of M&A. I switched companies to Carl Zeiss Meditech in 2001 when I was asked to move back to Europe and be a part of the team that was developing the MEL 80. And that was, of course, as much an engineering lesson to me as anything, because I was sitting in the room with actual physicists and engineers working out how to make an excimer laser as foolproof as possible and as accurate as possible. And that laser has survived 20 years of market and is still going strong as a workhorse with very advanced capabilities in terms of not just treating patients to get rid of their glasses, but to fix complications. And during those first few years, I got involved in looking at repairing night vision disturbances, which were quite common from the surgeries that we were doing in the 1990s. And it was during a wavefront guided study that I discovered that spherical aberration was not an enemy. In fact, if it was in the right amounts, it could actually be used to increase the depth of field of the eye. And this whole concept of EDOF was something that I started working on in 2003 or 4, before this was really on the agenda of anyone. And using EDOF from spherical aberration, I developed a procedure which I called laser blended vision. Blended vision was a term coined by Dan Dury for CK, but laser blended vision was a term that I coined using this technology, and developed an algorithm which eventually got incorporated into the MEL 80 and now 90 lasers at Zeiss. By about 2010, it was released as a product, and now it's used worldwide to enable pure presbyopic correction with people that have perfect distance vision, for example, with the least side effects, the least risk taken, and obviously with no cataract. So this is dealing with the true presbyopic group between 45 and 60, 65. And so we're able to correct presbyopia and any refractive error simultaneously without having to resort to the more invasive surgery of, taking out a clear lens and replacing it with a static lens that might have less light transmission than the natural lens. And the other thing in my career is that I, initially having been quite a doubter about SMILE, I did hop on board in about 2010, and I shortly became integral in the small group of clinicians who were really the team forging ahead, trying to make this thing come to life. Our database of SMILE procedures grew, and when it reached 4,000 eyes, we froze the database and analyzed a lot of elements. And we wrote a textbook, which is now it's a gold standard in terms of learning and onboarding oneself with SMILE. It's about 500 pages and 16 and a half hours of densely narrated video, including all of our complications and early learning curve issues, instrumentation, just every aspect. So that's been really satisfying, because teaching has become much more part of my routine. And during the full shutdown here that we experienced for COVID during those 10 weeks, I must have given 30 or so lectures and webinars, many of which were on the minutiae and the expert management of SMILE in different situations. We've treated and we've taught hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 surgeons by now. So by now SMILE is a, although it's not a very common technique because of the cost of the technology, it's certainly a very established technique. And in our clinic, 80% or so of the myopia is treated by SMILE. And finally, back to the therapeutic aspect. It's the 1 in 1,000 cases that I think are a big barrier to entry for many patients. Many people think, I don't want to have eye surgery because what if something goes wrong, even if it's a 1 in 1,000. And essentially my career has been spent greatly in terms of thinking about those patients and trying to manage these patients, and in most cases now, fixing these patients. In the last 5 years, I got a grant close to €1 million to develop software which can use the layered information within the cornea. So going right back to my earliest entry into ophthalmology, measuring the epithelium, and able to perform PTK, phototherapeutic keratectomy, with optical prediction based on epithelial thickness remodeling models, which came from an analysis of 7,000 scans that I'd personally done with my ultrasound system. And with Hartmut Vogelsang, who's one of the smartest physicist engineers in the world in this area, we developed software that can predict, we think, the optical results of PTK. We have a prospective trial that has been approved, IRB approved. It's on clinicaltrials.gov, and we're recruiting for this study. And at the end of the day, ironically, all of our epithelial knowledge, which is really for fixing complications, is going to also increase the accuracy of virgin eye surgery and refractive surgery to try and reduce the number of outliers and people that will need an enhancement to get onto their target. So what can I say? That's the short version of how I feel incredibly passionate about the specialty that I chose. And yes, I'm probably not saving lives like I kind of dreamed about when I thought about applying to medical school, rushing into an accident and putting people back together again. But I certainly feel like I put some people's lives back together again, having had irregularities in the cornea. But on a daily basis, I am enhancing people's quality of life through the safest possible methodology. And I just love my Star Trek procedure, which takes 3 minutes, heals in a few hours, and cures 98% of all refractive errors. Thank you.